All right, so today we're going deep on California, the Golden State, right? And, just going through this material you sent over, it's pretty remarkable. Like the scale of California's economy. I mean, we're talking about a $4.08 trillion gross state product as of 2024?
Yeah, no, that's right. And to put that in perspective, that 4.08 trillion, it's not just the biggest in the U.S. It makes California the largest, what they call subnational economy in the world. Okay. In gross state product, it's basically just the total value of everything produced within a state in a year, all the goods and services.
Okay, so biggest kind of get thrown around a lot, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, your sources point out something that's kind of mind-blowing. If California were its own country, its economy would be the fourth largest in the world.
Exactly.
Right up there with Germany and Japan.
Yeah, it's a real powerhouse.
So it's got to have some serious influence on the world stage then, right?
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. That kind of economic weight gives California a lot of leverage, especially in things like international trade negotiations. And it kind of sets a standard. When California makes a move, especially in areas like environmental regulations or tech, a lot of other states, even countries, they often follow suit, because it's such a huge market.
Makes sense. So we're not talking about just one industry here, right? I mean, looking at what you sent, it seems like California's got a pretty diverse economy.
Oh, yeah. Super diverse.
Finance, business services, government, manufacturing, you name it.
All those, they make up the core, the backbone of California's economic strength.
And then you've got these hubs, these geographical concentrations of specific industries. Like when you say Los Angeles, boom, Hollywood, right? Media, entertainment, massive industries. And then, of course, there's the San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley, all those tech giants, Apple, Alphabet, NVIDIA. It's like having two different incredibly potent economic centers all in one state.
Yeah. And what's interesting is those coastal hubs, they're also vital trade centers. I mean, Los Angeles, the Bay Area, and San Diego. It's not just about what they produce. It's also about the flow of goods. I mean, huge volumes of international trade are coming in and out of the U.S. through their ports.
It's easy to get caught up in the Hollywood glitz and the Silicon Valley tech scene, but we can't forget about the Central Valley.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that's the agricultural heartland of California.
A powerhouse, yeah.
Your sources emphasize that it's got the highest agricultural output of any U.S. state. I mean, we're talking about producing more than half of the country's fruits, vegetables, and nuts. That's huge.
It is. And it shows you that, California is not just a one-trick pony. It's got this strong foundation in agriculture and natural resources. But, I mean, there are some challenges there. The sources mention the recent droughts. They've had a big impact on businesses, on different industries, and especially on agriculture. It shows you even an economic powerhouse like California has its vulnerabilities.
Well, and I think, to understand how California got to this point, we got to rewind a bit. I mean, California's economic story is kind of one of constant evolution, right? So, to understand where they are now, let's go back. Let's talk about the gold rush, because that was, a major turning point.
Yeah, it was a game changer.
So, pre-1848, California was a completely different place.
Oh, yeah. I mean, after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, the U.S. took control of California. But in 1847, the U.S. military presence was really small, and they were spread thin, trying to just, maintain some kind of order. And Los Angeles was a tiny settlement, less than 5,000 people. It's hard to imagine that now looking at it.
And then, boom, 1848, gold is discovered. It's like someone lit a firecracker under California.
Yeah.
The gold rush completely changes everything. Your sources talk about this insane influx of people, over 110,000 non-Indian and non-California people by 1850, compared to about 7,000 Californians. I mean, that's an explosion of population.
It's a huge shift. And what's interesting is how it reshaped the economic and, even the urban landscape.
Yeah.
All the commerce, all the activity, it's centered around places like San Francisco, San Jose, Sacramento. They boomed because they were supplying the gold miners.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Los Angeles, it was still pretty small, relatively speaking, during those early boom years.
And all that rapid growth, it put a strain on the existing government, right? It wasn't really equipped to deal with that. So there was a big push for statehood.
Yeah. And they actually managed to become a free state in 1850 without even going through the normal territorial phase.
That's wild.
I know. I mean, they had so many people and so much gold was coming out of California that it gave them a lot of leverage in negotiating with the U.S. government. And all this was happening while the whole country was having this huge debate about slavery. which is just fascinating.
So the gold rush, it wasn't just about gold. It really set the stage for California's future in a lot of ways. And one of the things that really stands out, even back then, was the focus on education.
Yeah, they were ahead of the curve there.
So even right after the gold rush in the 1850s, there was this big commitment to providing basic elementary school education for pretty much everyone. And a lot of that was funded through local property taxes. And it wasn't just public schools, private education started taking off too. And, another interesting point, California was a leader in the high school movement in the 1930s. They saw that there was a need for more than just elementary education.
Right. And that commitment to education, it extended to higher learning as well. I mean, California has a long history of state-subsidized college education.
Yeah.
And then you've got a huge and highly regarded private system. Like you've got Caltech and Stanford. Those are world-renowned. And, your sources actually break down the three main public higher education systems. You got the California State University system, the University of California system, and the California community colleges.
And it's like the scale of these systems is mind-blowing.
Oh, it's massive.
The CSU, founded in 1857, that's the largest university system in the entire U.S. 23 campuses, hundreds of thousands of students, and then all the faculty and staff. And the UC system, founded in Berkeley in 1868. 10 campuses, and again, huge numbers of students, faculty, staff, alumni. And then you've got the California community colleges, over 100 colleges serving more than 1.8 million students. I mean, that's a huge investment in people.
Oh, absolutely. And it's paid off.
Yeah.
That commitment to education has been key to creating the kind of innovation and skilled workforce that you need to have such a diverse and really dynamic economy like California has.
Yeah.
But to make all that work, to connect all these people, these industries across such a big and diverse state, you need infrastructure.
Oh, yeah. And just getting to California back in the mid-1800s, I mean, that was an adventure in itself.
Oh, yeah. It was a trek.
Your sources describe these, grueling journeys. You could take the California Trail, which took months by wagon train, or you could go by sea, but then you'd have to, cross the Isthmus of Panama or Nicaragua or get on another ship. And even going all the way around South America, around Cape Horn, that could take 4 to almost 7 months. Especially if you were carrying freight.
Yeah, it was a long haul. But it's actually interesting how those logistical challenges, they led to some pretty amazing innovations in transportation and communication, like the transcontinental telegraph. That was finished in 1861. I mean, that was a game changer. Suddenly, you could communicate with the East Coast almost instantly. It was huge. Before that, you had the Pony Express, which, was way slower.
But then came the real game changer.
Railroad.
The Transcontinental Railroad, 1869. That cut the travel time from months down to a week.
Right.
Your sources really highlight how important that was. It connected California to the rest of the U.S. in a way that nothing else could have, and it led to this surge in commerce and migration.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about people moving around. The railroads also had a huge impact on agriculture. When they introduced refrigerated cars on the Southern Pacific Railroad in 1886, that changed everything for California farmers. The first shipment of oranges from Los Angeles to the East Coast happened in February of that year. And that basically kicked off the Southern California citrus industry. Before that, you couldn't really get perishable goods to the East Coast. So it's a great example of how infrastructure can drive economic growth.
And when we're talking about California, we can't ignore the elephant in the room. Water.
Yeah, water's always been a big issue.
So early agriculture was mostly concentrated in coastal areas and in the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta. Crops like winter wheat, they did well there because there was more water.
Right. But as agriculture expanded, especially when they started planting all those grape fields for wine production in the 1880s, they needed more water. And, one thing that your sources point out is the role of Chinese laborers in all this. They were the ones who built a lot of the levees in the Delta. That was backbreaking work, but it was essential. They reclaimed all this land for agriculture, which led to the growth of the rice industry.
And all that demand for water, it led to some massive engineering projects, like the Central Valley Project.
Yeah, that was a huge one.
That was started in 1935. And the whole point was to move water from Northern California, where there's more of it, down to Central and Southern California. They built all these dams, reservoirs, canals. It was all based on snowmelt from the Sierra Nevada.
Right. And then later on, you had the California State Water Project in the 1950s. That included the California Aqueduct, which moves water from the Feather River Basin all the way downstate. And we can't forget about the Los Angeles Aqueduct. That's been bringing water to LA from the Owens Valley since 1905. And then there's the Colorado River Aqueduct, which supplies the Imperial Valley. That goes through the All-American Canal.
But even with all that, California still faces huge water challenges. Like the Imperial Valley, it's so productive agriculturally, but it's completely dependent on those big water projects. And then you've got the cutbacks in federal funding for water projects in the 70s and 80s, and all the politics around water distribution and the legal battles over the Colorado River.
Yeah, and remember, in 2003, the federal government stopped releasing surplus water from the Colorado River. So it's definitely a precarious situation.
It's a reminder that water in California isn't just an environmental issue. It's an economic issue. It affects everything: agriculture, industry, urban development.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap this up, what are your key takeaways from looking at California's economy?
Well, it's clear that California's economic success comes from a lot of different sources. It's not just one or two things. It's technology, entertainment, agriculture, trade. They've got it all. And it's all been driven by, this history of rapid growth starting with the gold rush, and they've invested heavily in education and infrastructure. But, there are those challenges, especially with water. Managing resources is going to be key for California's future.
And for our listeners, I think what California shows us is that even the biggest economies in the world, they're not invincible. They face real challenges. And understanding how California's economy works, it gives us a glimpse into the complex dynamics of any major global economy. We see how important things like innovation are, sustainable resource management, and strategic long-term investments.
And, it makes you wonder, given all that, how things like climate change and global competition are going to shape California's future. I mean, what new gold rushes are we going to see, maybe in areas like sustainable technology or biotech? It's definitely something to think about.
Lots to think about. Thanks for this deep dive. I always learn so much from talking to you.
My pleasure. It's always great to chat.